I guess we can start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Busulanu, and I'm a senior program officer at the European Platform for Democratic Elections. Welcome to the EPDE election webinar. Today we're taking a closer look at Poland's presidential campaign, with the first round of the election just around the corner, set to take place in less than 2 weeks on 18th of May. This presidential campaign has picked up speed in the final days before the election. While the main focus is still on the top three candidates, the Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, the so-called independent candidate Karol Nawrocki, supported by the opposition Law and Justice, and Sławomir Mencen from the right-wing Confederation. But others are starting to get more attention in the media. And recent polls show that about 55% of people plan to vote, while around 40% say they won't. A second round of voting is very likely, but the outcome is still uncertain. Turnout is expected to be lower than the last year's record high parliamentary elections, where we saw around almost 75%. And liberals may not get as much support from young voters and those living abroad as they did during the last parliamentary elections held in October 24. The campaign is sharply divided between the major forces, the conservative Law and Justice Party and the centrist and liberal Civic Coalition. There is little room for candidates coming from smaller parties, including those trying to stay in the middle, like the Third Way, which is also a member of the government coalition. So what are the key trends and what are the voter concerns in these elections? Are traditional media or social media having more influence? Are debates still shaping public opinion, or are online messages more powerful? What role are state institutions playing in this role, especially those at the center of political conflict in recent years, the Supreme Court, Election Commission, etc.? And how much attention are voters paying to global issues like the war in Ukraine, the migration, and international security? Finally, have lessons from past elections helped build a system more resistant to threats from undemocratic forces, both inside and outside the country? So let's dive into the discussion. We have three experts, election experts from Poland joining this discussion today. Thank you very much for being with us, Zosia. Zosia is the president of the Political Accountability Foundation and Polish Citizen Election Observation Group, which is also a member of the EPDE, and she is also the member of the board of the EPDE and also of the board of the Global Network of Domestic Election Monitors, the GNDEM. We have with us also Jakub Szymik, who is a lawyer specializing in digital and EU policy. He has over a decade of experience in policy development and communications for profits and non-profits, and he is a founder of the CE Digital Democracy Watch, which he leads, and he leads also this organization's efforts on election integrity and technology regulations. And last but not least, we have Adam with us, Adam Tracik, who is the executive director of More in Common Poland. He was an associate fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations in Berlin previously, and in 2015 he co-founded the Warsaw-based independent foreign policy think tank Global Lab and was its chairman for 5 years. Adam, let's start with you and with more general question, a traditional question. I would say, what is the main intrigue of this campaign? And yeah, we understand that this campaign can be considered as a sort of second stage of fight between the liberals and the conservatives, the second stage after the very polarized parliamentary elections in October 2024. What are the main drivers of this campaign which shape the expectations of the voters? And you're conducting also opinion polls. So what do you see in those polls? Adam, the floor is yours.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much for the invitation and for the chance of being here and saying a few words about the election. I'll be sharing my screen. Don't worry, I have only a few slides, so it won't be a very big presentation. But I just wanted to give you like a broad overview of what is actually happening in Poland at the moment politically, not only concerning the election, uh, but of course, having that in always on the horizon. So basically, let me start with saying a few words about more in common. I just wanted to say, and because I think it's important to mention that we are a non-profit dedicated to strengthening democracy and reducing polarization, and we do it through research, which means we try to understand our societies as best as possible. And provide guidance to other organizations which basically need that guidance in order to be more effective and to communicate with the society. And I strongly invite you to visit our national websites. We work in the United States, in Brazil, in France, in Germany, in the UK, and we also have a presence in Spain and Italy. So you are warmly welcome to visit our websites and discover our analysis for yourself. Um, so let me start with the biggest question probably. Why does this election even matter? Why is this important from a political point of view? Well, because Poland is a semi-presidential republic, and although the president is not really involved in the day-to-day governance, he has one very important tool, which is the ability to veto bills passed by the parliament. Which means that the president, if he wishes or she wishes to play that role, makes him or her a very important player in the political decision-making process, even if not in the role of a let's say creative player, but a veto player, which I think is extremely important, as Polish governments do not tend to have the majority needed to override the president's veto, which is 3/5 of the vote in the parliament. And even in recent years, we witnessed that how important this veto right, this veto power is in making in shaping our political system. Andrzej Duda, the outgoing president, has played that role and has played that card a few times during his two terms, and also during the 2 terms of the previous government led by Law and Justice, the conservative, right-wing conservative Law and Justice Party. And although he comes from the same political camp as the previous government, he used his veto power few times and played a crucial role in slowing down the process of democratic backsliding, which would have put Poland on a similar trajectory as Hungary, which likely wasn't the case. Um, and the second thing why this election is so important was already mentioned by Adam, um, because basically it is a culmination of an election marathon. We have witnessed it's the fourth election in 2 years in Poland, which the most important was, of course, the general election in 2023. But giving the powers that the president possesses, having a president from an opposite camp, which is currently the case after liberals won the last election, makes it very hard for the government to be effective, to be an effective government. It is a major obstacle for the current centrist government. Sanjay Duda has vetoed a number of bills, but has also sent even bigger number of bills to the Constitutional Court, which means basically killing them off because the court is stacked with law and justice nominees. So the fact who wins the election will very strongly determine the ability of the government to pursue its agenda in the next 2.5 years. And this, of course, brings me to the final point on this slide, why this election is so important, because it's not only about the election, the presidential election in 2025. It's also about the general election in 2027, in 2.5 years time. Should a government-friendly candidate be successful, there will be no more alibis for the government. There will be no more excuses for the government, but it also will mean that the government has every chance to deliver on its promises, which the parties that composed the government made in 2023. But should an opposition candidate win, this could mean this could mean a stalemate in the political decision-making process. The government, at least in certain policy areas, will be a sitting duck with major obstacles to pursue its agenda and to implement the changes that it promised. So, what is the political mood in the country? Just to give you a kind of a background impression of the campaign. Well, basically, the 2023 election brought about a major political shift, which is very visible on this chart. And of course, law and justice was vetoed out of power, and a rainbow centrist coalition led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk was elected. And if you look at the judgment that people have of the first 18 months of this government, I think they are best described by the words of Comrade Diatov from the HBO series Chernobyl. It's not great, it's not terrible. So it's definitely, the mood in the country has definitely improved since the election, or on the day of the election, basically. But it's definitely far from enthusiastic, and you see a slight dip in recent months as well. So as I said, it's very far from enthusiastic, although it's still better than in the final years of the law and justice or law and justice rule. I would go into very detailed analysis why this is the case, but let me make a few general assessments or side notes, if you will, on both how the government is doing, but also what has changed or not changed since the 2023 election out, and how it affects the political mood in the country at the moment. Well, first of all, the current government is not a monolith, and I think it's very important to understand. It's made up of political forces of different colors and shapes, from progressive left to conservative Christian Democrats. And the composition of this government, and all the differences and disagreements between different parties, well, they have stalled progress on certain issues such as abortion, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, but also on issues like housing. There is still no agreement on few major issues, major policy areas concerning the society. So it's not only about the president's vetoes, but it's also about internal disagreements that creates kind of a frustration among government supporters, and basically affects their popularity ratings. Well, secondly, defeating populists doesn't mean that populism is out of town. And I think this is also a very important observation. I think the best example is Poland's tough stance on migration policy, including the temporary suspension of the right to asylum, which means that we have exited kind of an era in Poland which was defined by right-wing populism, and it was replaced by liberal populism, which is of course very heavily influenced by right-wing populism as well. And this is also a very important, excuse me, very important development of the last 2 years. At the same time, as you will see in one of the next slides, with the center shifting to the right, there might be actually a window of opportunity opening for the left and for left-wing candidates in this presidential election. Thirdly, restoring rule of law, which definitely will be also a topic of our discussion, is not easy. The government, in many cases, struggles to find proper solutions to reverse the reforms implemented by the Law and Justice government. And on multiple occasions, it also found itself in a situation where it was at least stretching the law. And of course, the public perception of the reforms, which are of course hampered by the president as well and his veto power, is also not very positive. More polls say that the government is creating more chaos in the judiciary system than bringing order and solutions. And we also see other problematic areas, such as with the public media broadcaster, or even some to a much smaller extent, of course, but still some cases of misuse of public funds for political reasons. And of course, fourthly, Poland remains a very highly polarized country, as it was already mentioned in the introduction. 4 in 5 polls consider the country to be divided, and almost none of our citizens consider Poland to be a united society. This also means that the level of support for the 2 main parties, for the 2 main political players, the Civic Platform and the Law and Justice Party, are very stable no matter what happens on the ground, so to say. There are basically 2 separate media ecosystems with completely opposite interpretations of the same events, which means that the general public has very few shared experiences and very few shared interpretations of these experiences. But let's look at the public opinion polls and see who the front runners of this election are. There are basically 13 candidates in total, which is one of the highest, if not the highest number in modern Polish history. But let me mention just 3 by name, which were already mentioned in the introduction. Rafał Trzaskowski is the candidate of the main ruling party, the centrist Civic Platform, and he has topped every single opinion poll since the campaign began. Rafał Trzaskowski is the mayor of Warsaw. He was the runner-up in the 2020 presidential election when he narrowly lost to Andrzej Duda, the outgoing president, in the second round. And Trzaskowski is probably the most prominent liberal politician in Poland. But I think it's worth mentioning that during the course of his campaign, he also flirted with some conservative positions, for example, regarding migration. He has basically, on many occasions, hidden his more liberal side in order to appear more attractive to more conservative, centrist, right-wing voters, which I think his campaign considers to be crucial in the second round. Karol Nawrocki is the second candidate when you look at the public opinion polls, second strongest candidate when looking at the public opinion polls. Technically an independent, but of course supported by the National Conservative Law and Justice Party. Nawrocki is a historian. He's the president of the State Institute of National Remembrance. And of course, he was nominated to that position by the previous government. And throughout his campaign, he has consistently been in second place with support levels between 20 and 30%. What is important to notice is that he was averaging slightly below the levels of support of his mother party, let's call them that way, which means that he's a slightly weaker candidate than the party normally would like to see, and I will come to his problems in a minute as well. Nawrocki has been also slightly underperforming because of a slightly unexpected rise of Sławomir Mencen, who is the candidate of the far right nationalistic but also libertarian confederation party, who has been something of a dark horse of this campaign. He started his campaign very early, dominating the news cycle for weeks, and his support steadily rose to reach an average of almost 20%. He was almost closing the gap to Nawrocki, and at some point, as you can see, in the beginning of March, he was very close to actually being the second strongest contender in the race. However, in recent weeks, Manson has slid back a little bit to support levels of around 15%. Other candidates, which I won't mention by name, are not very likely to play a decisive role in the election. But I mean, ahead of the second round, it's very important to look at the cumulative share of votes for coalition candidates, or sent left to the center, or even center and center left candidates, who are willing or might be tending to support Trzaskowski in the second round, and of course right-wing opposition candidates, because this will of course play a role in the second round. As I mentioned, it's also worth mentioning that left-wing candidates currently have a cumulative support of almost or around 10%, which is a massive gain compared to the last presidential election, where the only progressive candidate got 2.3% of the vote. But in general, as you look at this chart, I think it becomes very clearly that the levels of support for each candidate have been quite stable. And it also shows how strong both the polarization of the Polish political scene is, but also how stable it is, even looking at the smaller parties and their candidates.
Adam, sorry for interrupting you.
Yes.
We have to give the opportunity to also to our other speakers to.
Of course, I'm almost done. Last final sentence. I'm very sorry about that.
No problem.
And of course, it also gives you an impression that the campaign was kind of full of non-events. It was not very eventful, until actually 2 days ago, where we reached the first main, probably game changer of this campaign, which concerns Karol Nawrocki and the purchase of his second apartment. For a long time, he claimed he has only one apartment, and now it became clear, or evidence popped out, suggesting that he took possession of a second apartment in a quite questionable way, involving taking advantage of an elderly, disabled even occupant of this property. But nevertheless, it really seems that the second round will be, as always in our recent history, down to a duel between a civic platform, civic coalition now candidate, and law and justice candidate, with Rafał Trzaskowski being a slight favorite in the second round if he faces Nawrocki. All right.
We see here 3-1, right? The result. So let's see what will be the result of the election in 2025. But we see that PiS won 3 times, and the Liberals only 1 time in this kind of struggles. Thank you very much, Adam, for this introduction. I think that there are so many interesting threads in this campaign to be followed, including the scandals around the candidate Nawrocki. But I think this is kind of Polish folklore. But let's get back to some more general universal challenges. And Adam, you've mentioned already the highly polarized media landscape, and this is I guess what Jakub is working on very monitoring the media, but also the social media and advertising the social media. I think this is something we should get more deeper into those topics, and and also speak about a kind of resilience of the system and how Poland is regulating media. We saw a very hard struggle for like controlling the media and making them maybe a little bit more like independent as during the last 8 years, and what is the result of it, and how does it work during this campaign?
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction, Adam, and thank you all for being here and choosing your time to hear our expertise and our take on what's happening in Poland. I run
I hope
CE
maybe
Digital.
just a short
Mhm.
remark before we start talking about the media. Just wanted to remind our audience that the Q&A function is active, and you can ask your questions there, and we will yeah, pass them to our speakers. So Jakub, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So at CE Digital Democracy Watch, we mostly monitor what's happening online and how it impacts the results of the election and the quality of communication and content that politicians propose to Polish voters and broader and in other elections in the region. And I wanted to bring three things to the table today. The first one is the online visibility of specific candidates, also what they're spending for political advertising, and what's the disinformation attempts or disinformation landscape in this election in Poland. Adam mentioned that it is surprising to see very good results of Mencen in this election and that he is a dark horse in this election. For people who are watching this election mostly through the digital lens, it isn't that much surprising. The engagement of the far-right candidates and far-right parties in this election is very, very high. It isn't fully shown in the poll numbers and in the final results, but we are paying very close attention to the numbers that come with the far-right candidates and far-right politicians. One number that might be interesting to you is comparison of the average views of a TikTok video by Sławomir Mencen to other presidential candidates. For Mencen, it would be around 700,000 average view of video that's uploaded on his profile. For Rafał Trzaskowski or Karol Nawrocki, it would be around 250,000. So it's at around 30-40% of the views that Mencen can generate, especially on TikTok. The engagement is also very high with Mencen and his support group. What needs to be mentioned is that it's not only him, but it's the whole party system of Confederacja that's very effective in engaging online and very effective in movement building online. What happened in the middle of the campaign and what you could also have seen in the numbers, the poll numbers presented by Adam, is a dip in support for Mencen, and this is something that shows that the mainstream parties can effectively mobilize also online against those far-right candidates. This is what we saw in the recent weeks of the election, where both the mainstream parties, such as Koalicja Obywatelska, got way stronger and built stronger visibility for not only the main candidate, but other MPs, the MEPs, the senators. They also got way more involved in the campaign. And we also saw significant growth on the left side of political spectrum with Magda Biejat and with Adrian Zandberg, two left-wing candidates rising in the visibility online. It also translates into the polls, but not in such an effective big way. It's also important to note what are the differences in the platform penetration by different parties. For example, on TikTok, while 88% of politicians from Confederacja are present and have their account on this platform. With Koalicja Obywatelska, it was only 22% at the beginning of the campaign. So you see how big of a difference in building the community and building the voter base is when it comes to those digital platforms. When you look at Meta, most of the parties have very big penetration on that platform in Facebook and Instagram. When it comes to YouTube, there's very low level of penetration by politicians. Confederacja has around 60% of Confederacja politicians have some visibility, have some presence there, but the other parties are practically non-existent on this platform. So obviously, it's not only the politicians and their organic support. We are monitoring the political advertising spending, and this is something that is picking up closer to the election. Last week, it was the first time that the barrier of 1 million Polish zlotych being spent over 1 week was broken, which is around 250,000 euro. And we have pretty good visibility on what's happening on the digital platforms such as Meta and Google when it comes to the political spending. Although, and Zosia maybe will mention something more about this, the labels are not always aligned with the official campaigns. So for the purpose of official campaign monitoring and official campaign spending, it requires some work to make sure that the spending is fully transparent and fully official. The outlier that when it comes to the transparency of political advertising is X or Twitter. In the recent weeks, we saw multiple anonymous advertisements being shared on this platform, and they cannot always be attached to a specific campaign. The last thing I wanted to introduce to all of us today is the disinformation attempts or what we've seen when it comes to some maybe foreign interference or some coordinated inauthentic behavior. We obviously see some attempts on that, and there are multiple NGOs working on this and sharing information both with Polish institutions such as NASK, with European Commission that is very effective in gathering those information and supporting the election integrity based on their DSA competences, even though DSA is not implemented in Poland yet. But when it comes to some of the most interesting tools that we've seen that were used to misinform or are potentially inauthentic, it's definitely lots of scam attempts. So using the faces of the presidential candidates or the political actors in advertisements that are scam advertisements. We saw very big use of live broadcasts on some of the platforms that are not archived. So it's very difficult to monitor what's happening on those live broadcasts, and they are algorithmically pushed by some of the platforms to the top of your For You page, for example. And obviously, we also see some attempts of using the media logos in unauthorized ways and some impersonation of the popular media. For this presentation, I focus mostly on the political candidates, but obviously you need to mention the fact that there is a very heavy use or collaboration with influencers in the campaign. If you look at influencers such as Journalista or the Karol Paciorek, they are one of the most popular podcasts in Poland, and they hosted some of the presidential candidates, giving them visibility of 700,000 or even more views on the very long form interviews that they were running on YouTube and Spotify. And we also have an influencer candidate, so a person who is running Kanał Zero, which is one of the biggest YouTube channels in Poland, has officially registered as a candidate, which blurs the line between who is the candidate here and who is the influencer. His channel, Kanał Zero, was one of the most viewed channels even globally throughout this campaign, with very popular live broadcasts and live transmissions on YouTube. And also, given his ability to participate in the meetings of all the candidates, for example, where debate rules were being negotiated with the national public TV. It gave him visibility into how the campaign is being run, and he's also talking about this on his channel. So some people would say it's pro-transparency. I'm not exactly sure because the lines are very blurred as to what's his role here. He also invites other candidates to his channel to interview them. So overall, we're moving into the final week before the first round of the election, and we are very proud to be part of the system that tries to keep an eye on what's happening online in this election. One of the activity that we are doing is part of the rapid response system within the European Commission, the Code of Practice on Disinfo, and we are very happy that it was launched, and we have possibility of cooperating with the platforms directly to navigate what's happening online and to bring some examples of disinfo or illegal content to their attention with the mediation of European Commission. So I'm very happy to answer any follow-up questions, but I hope that's good for opening the conversation on digital affairs in this election.
Thank you very much, Jakub, and I also encourage the participants of this webinar to ask questions. You can use the Q&A function in the Zoom. Yes, thank you very much. I guess this issue with Canal Zero and the candidate who basically as a candidate makes money with his channel interviewing other candidates instead of spending money for his campaign is a kind of putting everything upside down, and it's a very interesting story, I guess. I see it for the first time, at least in the European context, not only in the Polish context. But yeah, we have also Zosia with us, and Zosia, you are looking at this campaign as citizen election observers. You're covering different aspects of also technical aspects of these elections. You are very engaged in discussions with the government, with the central election commissions, with the institutions. Basically, they are the most relevant institutions, with the parliamentary committees, etc., who are responsible for conducting and preparing and conducting these elections. My question to you is what has Poland learned in the recent years from the previous campaigns? Did Poland succeed in building more resilient institutional framework against new threats and challenges? Yeah, so basically, how the system works in comparison to the previous elections. And I must correct myself. I have the memories of the last parliamentary elections, which were very emotional, so still very fresh in my head. So I made a mistake in the introduction. Of course, these elections are already 1.5 years behind us, and in the middle, in the last year we had the European elections, the local elections, which were maybe not so emotional as the parliamentary, but yes, I think this is a culmination now with the presidential elections. So, Zosia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adam, and thank you for having me. I think what you said about, and what also the other Adam mentioned about the election marathon that we've had since 2023, I think that's also very important to help us understand some of the systemic issues that have been affecting the integrity of Polish elections. And I won't be just speaking about this election, but some of the issues that have been there for a couple of years now. that maybe have not necessarily been addressed, even though I feel like they at least have become part of the public debate. But we have not had the opportunity to address them, to implement some of the recommendations that have been issued both by domestic observers and international observers. In a way, because of the election marathon that did not give us enough room to initiate legal reform, but also because of the lack of political will on certain issues. So I will be mostly speaking about the election administration, the campaign finance system, and the judiciary. So on the election administration, what is important to know is that in 2018, Poland has changed the way it nominates its supreme electoral authority, so the National Election Commission. Previously, this body has been staffed solely with judges, so people who in general should have the public's trust when it comes to both their knowledge and their impartiality. In 2018, under Law and Justice, the system has been changed, and now 7 out of 9 National Election Commission members are nominated by Parliament, and they somehow reflect the political makeup of the Parliament at a given point. So the National Election Commission that we are operating with now has been appointed, the 7 out of 9 members have been appointed in January 2024. So they have been appointed by the new Liberal majority. And you can see how this, the change that happened in 2018 and the lack of safeguards has influenced the way that the National Election Commission works. On the one hand, first of all, it makes it easier for different people and different political actors to question whether the National Election Commission is actually independent and is able to act in an impartial way. But unfortunately, this is not just a question of perception and the question of maybe, evil forces trying to undermine the National Election Commission. Unfortunately, the National Election Commission has been undermining itself as well. One very important case that should be mentioned is the financial report of the Law and Justice Election Committee from the 2023 parliamentary elections, which has caused a significant back and forth and a significant discussion even within the National Election Commission. At first, the National Election Commission rejected the report. Then the case went to the Supreme Court, an issue that I will address in a couple minutes. And then basically the National Election Commission went back on its decision and said that it should not be ruling on the status of the Supreme Court. So it leaves the question to be basically resolved by other powers, by the government. And currently the situation, and just a reminder, we are 18 months after this election. The question has still not been resolved. The decision is now with the Minister of Finance, so basically with the government, and the money that Law and Justice is due after this election, the several millions of zlotys that Law and Justice is due, has still not been paid out, leading to, first of all, people questioning the impartiality of the National Election Commission, but also asking the question whether the integrity of this election and the equality of this election is being maintained if the biggest opposition party has not had or has been deprived of most of its financial resources. Moving on to, if we talk about money, moving on to the campaign finance system. What you need to know about our legal framework regarding campaign finance is that effectively the Polish election code allows for third-party campaigning, meaning that any voter, any physical person can campaign on behalf or against a certain political party or candidate, and can do so without explicit permission from the election committee. So in practice, it is impossible either for the election administration or for other observers to discern whether a certain action or certain expenditure has been taken basically with the election committee's knowledge, and whether it should be included in the official spending for the campaign. Another thing that is important to note is that there is no real-time information on campaign spending, apart from what Kuba mentioned. So the information that we're getting from political ad libraries, from Meta and from Google, because the election committees only have to report their spendings 3 months after the end of an election. And the reports and the associated documents are very much paper-based and delivered to the election authorities in tons and tons of boxes, making it nearly impossible for either the media or civil society activists to go through those reports. And also, one thing that needs to be mentioned in this context is kind of linked to the impartiality of the National Election Commission and the general public questioning whether the National Election Commission now can basically apply the rules, the campaign finance rules, the rules on abuse of administrative resources consistently from one party to another. And so moving on to the last issue, the Supreme Court. Many of you who have been following the rule of law crisis in Poland are aware that some of the chambers of the Supreme Court that have been created under Law and Justice have been ruled not to be courts under European law. So the chamber that will be deciding on the validity of the election, that decides on all kinds of electoral matters, is considered not to be a court under European law, which means that the trust in the rulings of this chamber has been undermined. Also, all of the judges that make up this chamber are so-called neo-judges, so they have been appointed by the previous or the faulty National Council of the Judiciary. I don't want to get too technical here, but the discussion that we are having now in Poland, that we have been having for months now, is what will the Supreme Court do? Whether the Supreme Court will rule that the election has been valid, whether it will look into the decisions of the National Election Commission, whether it will consider the deprivation of funds from Law and Justice something that has affected the equality of the campaign, and if what will the political forces do as well, whether they will respect such a ruling from a court that is not a court. Will they try to manipulate the court somehow to rule in their favor? And another question from legal scholars: do we even need a ruling on the validity of the election for the new president to be sworn in? So if you want to really be fatalistic here, you have some people in Poland saying right now that we will not have a new president because there is no court to rule on the validity of the election. Which, and I think that's my most important point, all of these issues are very much in the public domain. They're very much being discussed, not just by experts in closed rooms, they're being discussed in the media and by regular people. So all in all, this very much undermines people's trust in the election itself, in its equality, in its integrity, and people's belief whether the state institutions, including the National Election Commission and the Supreme Court, can actually act in an impartial way and safeguard and protect the values and the standards that they need to be protecting. So I'll end right now, happy to answer questions.
I don't see any questions yet in the Q&A. So my question, just to follow up on what you've said on the trust, which is I think trust in the system is something is a key element of each elections. The trust in the institutions they are responsible for conducting these elections. And when I see the expected turnout around 55%, it's considerably lower than during the last elections, and normally would have always a higher turnout during the presidential elections than during the parliamentary elections. And do you think that all those issues you've mentioned, they have an impact on the overall trust in the society in these elections? Would the people say that they don't trust the system, they don't go to vote because they don't have an influence on what is happening up there?
I mean, I would say that 55% turnout is still a decent turnout when it comes to Poland. Although, as you said, presidential elections, we would be expecting a higher result. I would like to think that people care about the system and they care about the standards enough to have a position on this. But I think what is happening here is rather people being disillusioned by the political class. Coming off from a high of the 2023 parliamentary elections, the 74% turnout. I think a lot of people have had very strong expectations for this government, and maybe they are seeing that the government has not been delivering on the promises that it made to its voters before the election. And of course, it is understandable. Adam spoke about this very clearly at the beginning, the role of the president, the role of Andrzej Duda, and the fear of the presidential veto has been stopping a lot of the government's promises and a lot of the government's policies from stopping them from being enacted. But I think, and this is my personal view as a Polish voter, I think that the government or the ruling parties could have communicated or set expectations more clearly to their supporters for now to avoid such a big drop in turnout, such a big drop in popularity, and basically maintaining the reality of Polish elections that has been there for many years, that we have to choose between the lesser of two evils. And I think on that, the 2023 parliamentary elections have been an outlier. They have been about hope. I think this election is more just the reality of Polish politics and just trying to I don't know, survive or exist in the system. But I'm sure Adam has more concrete data on the moods of people and how they think about this election and what it is about.
Adam, do you have?
Yeah, I would like to mention
data?
just one particular thing, because I think it is important. That 2023 election was indeed kind of an outlier with an extremely high turnout, at least for Polish standards. I know in many countries you have turnout numbers of more than 80%. In Poland, it's very unlikely to reach that numbers. We actually have, according to our research, around 30% of the Polish population who are hardcore non-voters, who simply don't feel that it is important for them and for their lives to be interested in politics. They reject politics as a concept in a sense. They live slightly outside of the of the system, at least in political terms or in terms of civic engagement. Let's call it that way. So already the turnout of 60%, which I'm expecting will be reached in the first round, is already fine for Polish standards, as Zosia mentioned. And there's, I think, also one more important issue. Zosia was very right to say that many people are simply disappointed, not in the system per se, but simply in politicians not delivering on their promises. But also for at least a significant number of people, politics have become less menacing in the last 18 months. So they don't worry about politics that much because the last 2 years, especially after the constitutional court ruling on abortion, making abortion practically illegal in Poland, was a symbol of politics being a menace to your personal well-being, and the decisions made on a political level being a menace, being a threat to your personal well-being. Now this threat is it has kind of disappeared from people's minds. So there is kind of slightly more potent incentive to go and vote because there is less on there's the stakes are simply lower in this election than they were in 2023, and this is one of the reasons why I think that turnout will be definitely lower than in 2023. But still, I'm expecting a turnout of around 60, maybe even 65% for the second round, probably.
Mhm. Mhm. Jakub?
Um, Yeah, I very much agree with everything that was said both by Zosia and Adam, and this also is reflected in how the campaign is being run online. In 2023, we saw massive turnout campaigns that were mostly targeted at very progressive young voters, at women who were supposed to make the change and go to the booths. And the emotion that was driving this was progress, was very big change. I think that after over 12 months of the current government not delivering on this in a way that was expected or that was promised in the campaign, it is more difficult to mobilize around those issues, and the social values, the progressive social change that might have been the tipping point in 2023 elections now plays against the progressive candidates. I believe it's Fundacja Batorego research that showed that up to 7% of the turnout might have been connected to the Get Out the Vote campaigns that were mostly online driven and were aimed at those very progressive voters. So it might be it might be relevant, especially in the runoffs in the second round of the election.
And Jakub, about the media once again, and this kind of black and white picture of the political scene, which is divided basically between the civic platform and the law and justice. I mean, is it we see basically the same also in the media sphere, right? We have like the liberal media and the conservative media. Do you think that this is also not something which influence, the mood in the society, so that people like they don't like this kind of divide in the media sphere? They are looking for like a third solution, a third way, perhaps also in the media landscape,
Mhm.
just to have the feeling that they obtain, neutral picture of the world, and not the one
Yeah.
which is somehow coming from the one or the other political
Mhm.
scene.
I understand your question, but I'm not sure I agree. One of the main things that happened after the public TV was like the previous Law and Justice led public TV was cancelled, and there were changes in the governance structure of the public television. is that the far-right news party, Republika, that continues the legacy of the right-wing messaging, it picked up in their viewership immediately, because this is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they are now the most watched Polish media news station. So lots of the audience that was used to the very polarized public media from the Law and Justice government, they just moved their attention and their eyeballs into the private TV station that's as polarized, even if not more polarized. So I like, when I'm looking at the main landscape of the mainstream media, it really is the fact that many of them are seem to be politically aligned, or are perceived as politically aligned. And I'm not exactly sure if the changes in the public media in TVP were fully a success, because one of the main events of this campaign, the presidential debate, it proved to be a highly controversial event with some questions around the funding or very close collaboration to the Civic Coalition candidates in organizing and hosting this debate. So definitely the vision of the pure water in your TV channel that was introduced in the first days of new ownership, new management of the television. I don't think I'm not sure if people see it come to fruition. But maybe Adam, Zofia, maybe you have more data-driven comments on that.
So maybe Adam and Zofia, just in terms of like wrap up around the question of Jakub, but maybe also your final ideas what will happen before the first round, and what you expect to come in the next 2 weeks.
I could start. I don't have an answer to Jakub's question, but maybe just as a general remark, I think that the current crisis in Karol Nawrocki's campaign will be extremely interesting for analyzing both our kind of public space and our media space. I think this is something that could really be a topic, one of the very few topics that we actually had in recent years, which could break the bubble, which could be a topic that is being widely discussed by the whole society, because it's a topic that is kind of very close to our personal experiences, and also a very sensitive topic on a very kind of personal family level as well, concerning senior citizens as well. It will be extremely interesting to observe what happens in the online, but not only online, as well in the real world, so to say. And it really it will be extremely interesting to see how it affects Karol Nawrocki's electoral result, especially in the first round, because it will show you how strong aligned with which political camp the voters really are, and how strong polarization really is, and how closed the bubbles, the media bubbles for each political camp really are. So it's also kind of a very interesting exercise for sociologists and for political scientists as well. So it's not only about really thinking about the election result, it's really about thinking how our society functions in such a polarized environment, with both online and offline polarized spaces. So this is definitely the thing to watch on many different levels.
Thank you,
Right,
Adam.
and I think I'll take it into a similar direction that Adam did, and kind of look beyond the election result. I think why this election is important, we've already talked about some of the systemic issues, the public media, the judiciary. I think Poland is being closely watched by the likes of, the opposition, the civil society in Hungary and in other places, as a test case on how to restore rule of law and how to do it without actually making more damage to the system. I think if it is a victory by Rafał Trzaskowski, I think the ruling coalition will not have any more excuses not to proceed with those rule of law reforms to the Constitutional Tribunal, to the Supreme Court, to the public media, and to all of the other things that need to be reformed to actually take Poland out of crisis mode and kind of help to refocus on some other topics which are actually more important to Polish voters than this. And specifically on electoral reform, as a as a citizen observer, I think we definitely hope that the 2 years that will come between the presidential election and the next parliamentary election would be an opening for a comprehensive reform of the electoral code, both in terms of the legal framework specifically, but also how it is being implemented, what are the oversight institutions, etc. Because one thing that we know, and one thing that also this campaign has shown with the controversies around the debates, the controversies around what to do about Krzysztof Stanowski and Kanał Zero, it has shown that Polish election law is very much inadequate and is not ready to address the 21st century challenges. And this is something that we as civil society, but also Polish institutions need to really address before these inadequacies are exploited by other actors.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for this interesting discussion. I'm surprised that it was not dominated by issues like Russian interference, etc., which was the case during several of our recent webinars related to different elections in Europe. Which is, I think, a good sign. It's in a way, and yeah, we don't stop here with this discussion. We will continue. We invite you all to our second seminar. We are planning already another webinar after the second round, and yeah, so you are all invited to continue this discussion, and yeah. Stay tuned with the EPDE. Follow us on our social media, and yeah, see you again very soon. Thank you very much.